Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Fortin. I'm the host of this podcast, Doers Within Emerging Markets. And I just want to share my experience with using Anchor so far. When the pandemic started, I thought about starting a podcast, and the whole idea was to bring in some really amazing folks that are doing some great work in their respective industries within the emerging markets. And the Anchor platform really helped me get the word out there and also just make it a lot easier for me to invite the guest and just share the amazing experiences they've had and the amazing work they're doing in their respective industries within the emerging markets. So it's pretty fun. You don't even worry about the technical part of making a podcast. You actually just focus more on the content. And Anchor has done it really well for me. So I will highly encourage anybody who is trying to start a podcast to try to use. Just check out Anchor, and I think you won't regret it. I'm not a technical person, but if you listen to these episodes that I've been publishing so far, it seems like I know what the technical part of it, but Anchor helps you take care of the technical part, and you just focus on the content. So feel free to check it out. I highly encourage. You won't regret it, and it's right there. You don't pay anything. So in times like this, I think starting a podcast and getting the word out there, irrespective of what you're doing, will be a really great experience. So thank you guys for listening to my episodes. Please check out Anchor, and you will have a great time. So cheers, guys, and see you guys next episode. Thanks. And it doesn't represent Babson College. It doesn't represent any of the companies that I've started, just to give that a full disclosure. But I think at this point in time, especially what we're unfortunately going through, as in the war with this virus, is that I think the trends of investment will shift towards emerging markets. I just have the sense that, just for hedging purposes, but also the supply chain from China doesn't really affect African companies. Yes, there are acquisitions and there's a lot of FDI from China into Africa, but I do think in terms of doing a business in Africa, the impact is not hasn't been felt yet. Again, I don't know how this virus will affect the businesses on the ground in terms of just the health of the people as well as the government regulations. But I think as a whole, like just in isolation, I think moving forward, there'll be a lot of interest in investing in African companies or just in Africa in general, not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector. And I decided to choose this topic because I felt at some point we have to analyze not just the risk, because we always talk about the risk in Africa, and sometimes it's pretty evident, but we also have to talk about the reward. Like if someone is willing to go back to start a company there, or someone within Africa is starting a company and does the right things and find the right partners, there's definitely some upside and economic profit that the person can make. So that's why, to some extent, I wanted to make sure that we talk about the reward of taking the risk to do something in Africa, because that by itself, it requires a lot of not just confidence in yourself, but confidence in the system, right? That in some way things will work out. And by good or bad, I think maybe in the next, not in the next decade, I think sooner than later, people realize that it's advantageous to invest in Africa as a continent. And with the current events unfolding, it might seem as though that might actually be the case sooner than later. So this conversations is more about, I'm just laying the foundation, but the most important thing is that I want you guys also share your perspective of what you think about investing in Africa from a risk perspective as well as from a reward perspective. Like a lecture, right? So yeah. I'm just laying the foundation that we can have a conversation call that can just highlight some of the points I have in mind, but just like some of the macro as well as micro examples that I think will be very interesting for us to end the conversation with. But on face value, I just want you guys to give me your take on what you guys think at the risk. And I know it sounds very evident, the risk in investing in Africa, but maybe from your personal experience, because I think on the ground is different, right? When you
Yeah.
actually do business on the ground, it's a different conversation than
Yeah.
what Deloitte will talk about or what McKinsey will talk about. When you care, you have to give them that money. So I think that gives a different perspective, and I think it'd be nice calling. I mean, maybe someone like you have had some experience that might be actually beneficial to me as
Yeah.
well as to Duncan. So anybody that wants to start, please feel free to.
Um, Let me just give my perspective because I've
Yeah.
been, as I told you guys, I'm so passionate about Africa, and I came to Europe when I think 2001 when I came to Germany, and before I was coming to Germany, my aim was to come and study and then go back to Cameroon and do something,
Mm.
you know, uh, in Cameroon. So when I finished my studies here, I started working, and uh, I thought, okay, maybe I work some few years and then I move back to Africa. And I had a plan. I really had a plan. I drew a plan. I wrote down a plan. I did everything. And then when I visited Cameroon, I tried to see if I can start putting the foundation of the plan I wrote and everything. Then the first thing I had was just roadblocks. I was confronted with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of disappointments. And then I always went to Cameroon. I spent, I think the highest was 1 month, but in 1 month time, I couldn't do anything. So I kept people there to do things for me. But what I found was it was not working.
Yeah. Yeah.
You tell people to do something, they do what they want. So that was
Exactly.
very difficult, staying here and trying to. So my family, my dad was a teacher, my mom was a teacher also. So and then we had a farm, very big farm. So my dad always wanted us to somehow increase the yields of the farm and all what was working there. So we were always thinking about trying to improve the farm and such things. But we started also facing. I had an idea because I just wanted. I did not want to do something just on the farm. I wanted to do something in the whole village. So I went to the village. I called everybody and I tried to talk to everybody. This is what I want to do, and so on. And so some people came out and were starting saying, "Oh, you want to influence us and take our properties and this and that," and that was the second disappointment I had. Trying to bring people together. That you guys, with many people you can do things, very big things, but this I could not send this message through. The message never went through these people. They were always thinking, "I'm just there to take their things."
Mm.
They would think because you're coming from Europe, you have a lot of money, you take their things away, and there were a lot of negative energy in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I told my dad, okay, we have to do this thing differently. We have to go, maybe we do something on the farm and then show the people this how you can do it, and then we contact them back again because we're trying to do something like a franchise that people can do small farmings, and then we join together and sell the things in a better way, so that we have transportation means. We can look for on transportation means, and then we can sell the goods when we want. You don't have to always wait for somebody to come and take them or such things. So those were my ideas, the first ideas I had that failed, as I can say. and and then I came back and I concentrated on my work here, and then I moved to Switzerland. And a second idea came to me because the last time I was in Cameroon, I went to the hospital and I saw at the hospitals in Cameroon, they're very not equipped with very simple um, test equipments. If you are ill or you need to do some tests, there are some certain very simple equipments, you can't find them there. They'll send you to another hospital to go look to go do a test and then come back here. So the whole day you're wasting your time just doing a test, and then you come to the doctor, he says you should come the next day. So I have a lot of friends who work in the medical equipment industry, and I contacted them in Germany and I asked them, hey, what do these doctors do with these old equipments that in Europe or US that they don't want to use the new ones? What do you guys do with the old equipment? They told me they always receive them back and they try to refurbish them and then they sell them to East Europe or something like that. So I was thinking that could be an idea for us in Africa. The hospitals in Africa or the clinics, they can't buy these machines, but we can go, and I was thinking of a business model where I can introduce um, I bring the equipments, I give them to the hospitals. They don't have to pay. They just have to pay some money every month, a little bit of money every month. They use them to do the test, and then we build a team that teaches them to do the test. Because I had the guys here, I know them. They were ready to also help me for that, and we try to introduce some simple machines to clinics, and then they can be using it for such tests. I'm still following up this idea, and that's what I'm very passionate about, because I know we have a lot of people. It will help a lot of sick people, not traveling from Bamenda to I don't know if you know this hospital in Bansa, I don't know how to call it.
BBH,
Yeah, something
Bouncer
like that.
Baptist Hospital. Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, yeah,
all those places, people
yeah,
travel a lot just to go for some specialists.
yes, yes.
And I'm not really, for me, I just want to make something that will really help you will have a very big significant I don't know, change.
Impact.
Yeah, impact,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know if you guys just a topic. This topic, I'm very interested in this topic, and I always like to discuss it with people how to say it.
yeah. Definitely. No, thanks, Colin, for sharing. And I think, I mean, just saying, you said so many interesting points, and within your story, there are so many um, um, pain points, or even like indicators of like things that we can dissect in this conversation, in this discussions session that you might go on to tomorrow. But one thing that I so I completely relate to how you talk, especially about coming from outside the country and going back in. And there's this, uh, it's not just someone being confident in what you have to do, but just that lack of like someone knowing that you have good intentions, right? There is this perception that you're coming either to take advantage of them, or you're just telling them what to do. And
Right.
I think I think it's a very critical thing that, I mean, something that's overlooked by most Africans in diaspora. I think most of the time, especially, let me see, if you left high school in Cameroon and came to the US or Europe, and you spent your formative adult life there, and you went back home, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around the mindset of people, especially like the elderly, and how you respect your elders. That if if you don't if you don't really approach it the right way, you might actually lose a lot of opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think one thing that you actually struck with me was like when you were trying to reach out to the other people to build like with other farmers, and they were just like, hey, you're trying to, just take advantage of us. But
Yeah.
I think it's key, and this is a conversation that I've been talking. I've had conversations about this with other Africans in Boston, and it's a very similar. The story is very common. Especially if you're very young, like in your early 20s, it's just like you're just blown off. Like, hey, just don't just come here. And I think that is a key factor of how to approach just community, and how to think about, how do you perceive yourself first when you're going in, and how do you perceive the people that you have to interact with, and what's the common ground that you can arrive at to get something done. Duncan and I attended the Harvard Business School conference, the Africa conference at the Harvard Business School, the annual conference. And one of the keynote speakers, Sango Deli, who is based in Ghana, he mentioned something that was very fascinating. He said, he has 3 degrees from Harvard. He went to undergrad at Harvard, did his law and business school at Harvard. And he said once he got into Ghana, he's from Ghana. He said once he went to Ghana, he just threw those degrees out because once you get there, it's like the old boys club and the old women's club that decide decide whether you make it or you don't make it. And he realized that you really need the people that have the real knowledge. And I mean, this is someone that has been successful in what he's doing as a venture capitalist. He said, if you really want to make it there, you have to understand that there's a different type of knowledge that is required to succeed. And one is actually being part of this old boys club and old girls club, old women's club. And he said that was very critical in how you approach Africa. The other speaker who sat with him, it was like a fireside chat, was this guy. He wrote a book called Risk versus Return. Risk and Return. Duncan, do you know his name? Risk and Return.
I have the book right here.
Yeah.
It's Yomi Jebi Mowen. I think this is the book.
That's the book. Yeah, that was the other speaker there. And Duncan, you were there, right? Can you say a little bit about that guy?
I'll just read you his bio very quick.
Yes, sure.
He's one of the founders of Cardinal Stone, a Lagos-based West African-focused asset management firm that currently manages $250 million across various asset classes. Today, Yomi co-heads Cardinal Stone's private equity business, where he invests in and guides small to medium-scale businesses towards positively transforming the West African economic landscape. Earlier in his career, Yomi worked as a management consultant in the New York office of Bain & Company and as a research engineer with Motorola. He earned a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science degree in electrical engineering from Virginia Tech and an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Returned to Nigeria in 2007 after living in the US for 13 years. He now lives in Lagos with his wife and 3 daughters. And about the book, it's a story of Yomi's return to Africa, a journey that begins with a search for self-fulfillment, which then evolves into an entrepreneurial adventure filled with tribulations, triumphs, and many life lessons that will keep readers engaged from start to finish. So in a casual conversation voice, he gives an honest, often hilarious, and sometimes sobering account of what it feels like to chase a dream under highly uncertain circumstances. That's pretty much about himself and about the book.
Great story.
I mean, Colin, if you can get your hands on that book, I think you should just as a person. So I was fortunate to meet him as well as Duncan. I think he encompasses a lot about the dilemma that Africans in diaspora face, but also how to overcome it. I think he's one of the lucky ones and maybe there's a blueprint within that book that can help.
Yeah, I've already checked it on Amazon now.
I think it's very insightful, and he seems very genuine. I think he comes from a very good place, and he's very honest about the challenges, but also honest about his success as well. So I think that's something that from that interaction with him, I was able to see that there's something good on the other side. It's just that you have to do you have to be very smart on how you do it, but also like you really need to find people that get the system.
I think those were by mistakes. I think the way I approached the people.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and mistakes are okay. And mistakes are fine. I think.
For me, mistakes are always the good way to go because only through mistakes you learn, and that's how we move on.
Exactly. Duncan, I know Duncan has built a successful company in Kenya, and I think he has. I mean, Duncan has traveled across Africa as well, and even in Asia. He worked as a consultant in, I think, Malaysia. Was it Malaysia?
In Cambodia.
Cambodia, sorry, my bad. Cambodia. Yeah. So I think you have some interesting, and he does microfinance, which he just talked in the early meeting. So I think he deals with real risk, risk where he
Yeah.
can lose money.
Yeah.
So Duncan, if you can, I mean, add on what Colin said or give a different perspective, I think that would be interesting, and we can go back and kind of give a full picture of the challenge. I know Colin talked a lot about challenges, but I think there's a reward element too, and maybe the reward is the next 5 years for you, Colin, or 2 or 1 year, we don't know, but it would be nice to end this session with a positive note. So, but Duncan, if you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I mean, thank you for that introduction. For me, I think I will talk very much towards, entrepreneurial opportunities and investment opportunities that push towards the micro segment. I think in many African countries, it's the small and medium-sized businesses that employ the majority of the people, and so is the United States. Right now, we see the same situation right now with the current lockdown, and the virus thing that's happening in the US right now. A lot of businesses are closed. People are losing jobs. It's the same situation and even worse in most African countries. But from a risk perspective, I think mostly I will speak for the microfinance from the financial services industry, which just an umbrella for microfinance and banks, overall banks and micro insurance companies. I think a lot of African countries miss on the macroeconomic data that investors would really be keen to benchmark against. So a lot of countries and institutions per se do not really know how to capture this data and even to report on it. And because most African countries' currencies are plugged on the dollar, anytime there's a fluctuation in the dollar exchange rate, they really take a strong hit. So that was the same occurrence that happened in Kenya, for example, about 2 years ago, where the exchange rate against the dollar was 86 and it went all the way to 110. From an investor investing from the US or from Europe, you want to think about investing because they do invest in local currency. And even though they invest in local currency, when they pull back the investment, they have to pull it back into the dollar. So the conversion aspect of it, even though they make good returns, good IRRs locally, when they pull back the investment, they don't make much. So I think that's the opportunity that's missing, especially for African-based entrepreneurs from that macroeconomic aspect. But also something that bolsters that also is, the due diligence procedure in the investment process. So I did my internship recently with a private equity firm in New York, and we were investing in microfinance institutions in Africa. And just to see how African institutions present the valuations, and from looking at it from the lens of a US-based investor or a Europe-based investor, it's totally different. First, I would say a lot of entrepreneurs in Africa are very resilient and really see the opportunity because they live there locally. I was born and raised there, lived there for over 20-something years. But to be able to present, to number crunch actively and to show the valuation in a way that's convincing to an investor that's coming externally that has not set foot in Africa, it's still a huge challenge. So a lot of private equity firms that are based in the US have their own way of doing the valuation, and it's usually brings down the valuation that they get from locally based African companies. And so the end result is because a lot of these institutions explore investments from outside of the US, they end up settling for very low, for very raw deals. And it's just a question of how do we bridge the skill set and the gaps in how do these companies report in their financial statements, how do they do the evaluation, and how do they adapt to the international standards of doing some of these things. But it's just across board, whether they are small, medium, or even bigger institutions. So those are just top of my mind. I can still talk about this the whole evening because it's really something that's a challenge that I have.
Gain a lot. You say, this is how I performed as a portfolio. And so if no one's really willing to hurt their returns by being exposed just for the sake of being exposed to emerging markets. And that's kind of what feeds into why investors don't want to look in African markets. I think that if if we could push the narrative, give it, we could provide transparent data on the fairings of African market and properly identify the risks and come up with strategies on how to overcome those risks, because the risks in different geographical markets vary. You know, you don't have to worry about, in the US, for instance, you don't have to worry about timing of information because the markets are pretty efficient with information. You can't say the same for markets, say, in Ghana. Do you understand? So how do we overcome that? And I think that that's kind of where we haven't got to. The other thing is just, so I'd say the biggest challenge there is the bottlenecks in the flow of information, and then just other physical infrastructural challenges like the flow of goods and services, and then the flow of people kind of also get in the way. But that was a bit all over the place, but that's kind of how I think I've seen emerging markets and exposure to emerging markets, particularly in Africa, discussed here in terms of portfolios that I've seen.